Hello, I'm John Perry, and welcome to Representative Gary Glenn Reports with Representative Gary Glenn.
John, good to see you again,
Representative,
sir.
It's good to see you too. A lot to talk about today. Maybe to start off with an update on your health. How are things going?
John, so far, it's good news so far. I think since we last taped, I've been to the University of Michigan Center Cancer Treatment, and they told me I'm in remission. Anybody who's not familiar with prostate cancer, a certain test called a PSA test, if you're at 4 or above, that's cause for concern. And on January 15th, my test was 348. That's a little bit higher than 4. 1 week later, it was only 100, and my doctor in Midland called that a near miracle. 4 weeks later, it was 1.1, which is lower than men who don't have any type of even threat of cancer. So certainly all good news. We're certainly grateful for the thousands of prayers, for the great and compassionate care got at Mid-Michigan and at the University of Michigan Cancer Center. But according to people who know far more about it than I do, some of the leading cancer doctors in the country, I'm in remission. So we have a simple prayer. I hope that people will join us in praying, and that is simply that it stay where it is.
And how do things look over the weeks and months ahead then?
Well, I'm going to be able, some of the damage it did to my spinal column, the neurosurgeon says is going to be healed in about 6 to 8 weeks. And as far as I can tell now, I'm going to be able to return to normal activities like playing basketball. You know, before I knew I had a fracture in my spinal column, I was pushing cars out of snow and hauling firewood and playing basketball. And apparently I'm going to be able to return. I returned from shoulder surgery and knee surgery to playing basketball. I have my doubts about this one, but looks like I'm going to be able to get back on the court after this one as well. And I had the privilege this morning, John, every month there is a joint House and Senate prayer breakfast, bipartisan, that Representative David Rutledge, a dear friend from Ypsilanti, a Democrat, hosts along with Tim Kelly from Saginaw. And this morning I had the privilege of being the speaker and sharing my experience throughout this thing. But I just want to say to folks who are viewers, who heard about this, saw it in the paper, heard it on TV, whatever, and I know prayed for us. We've had letters and cards from hundreds of people and communication reflecting thousands of prayers across the country. Prayer card in the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem. 300 pastors in Africa at a conference who, it was reported to me by a pastor in Monroe, were praying for me and my family. So we are extremely grateful for all of that. We believe in the power of prayer, and I think I'm a testimony and witness to the healing power of prayer, and just happy to be in this situation, to go from, they didn't tell us everything until after the fact, but to go from stage 4 to remission in 5 weeks. My doctor said halfway there was a near miracle. I think I know what to call it. And again, we make no presumptions. We have no sense of entitlement. We just continue to pray that the good turn of events that we've had since getting the first diagnosis, it just stay right where it is, and we'll be certainly grateful for that.
Obviously, very good news there. You had some good news, too, from the American Conservative Union in terms of the work that you do here at the state capitol.
Well, and from a standpoint of folks who have every right to hold me accountable for any thing they want as their state representative, I want our viewers to know that throughout all of these treatments and diagnosis and such, that I have not missed a single vote. I've not missed a single committee meeting. I've been here on the job every day in Lansing when the legislature is in session, and have kept up a pretty aggressive schedule of town hall meetings. We had one recently at the Dow Library in Midland, and it was well attended and very spirited. Individual meetings, office hours, meeting with people who want to sit down and talk to me personally on Mondays and Fridays. And then the full day of legislative activity here on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. And some of those personal meetings in the district occur on Saturdays as well. And so I've been able to totally maintain my responsibilities, do my duty as the state representative for Bay and Midland counties. And was gratified, certainly, to get an additional type of recognition this week by the American Conservative Union, which has been around since 1964. It's a national group. And they pride themselves in promoting what President Reagan used to call the three-legged stool of fiscal conservatism, limited government, lower taxes, socially conservative policies, pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and a strong national defense. We don't have a whole lot to do with the national defense policy, at least not to the extent that Congressman Molinar, for example, might have at the federal level. But I am a member of the Military and Veterans Affairs Committee. And the American Conservative Union selected several dozen votes that were cast over the last year and judged me to be, along with 2 other state representatives, all 3 of us were tied for the most conservative voting record in the State House of Representatives. So they awarded me an award for conservative excellence. If you got less than 90%, you got the award for conservative achievement. So we were able to get a notch above that and have conservative excellence. And I'm gratified by that. I intend to continue to follow in the footsteps of John Molinar and Tony Stamas, who, when they were in the House of Representatives, were also judged by various ratings to be the most conservative, have the most conservative voting record in the House. So it's kind of like a Midland County tradition, and proud to do my part to uphold that. But it is a reflection, just as an example, the guy, and I won't mention any names because it's probably not appropriate to do so, but the guy that I endorsed for president in the Republican primary won in Midland County pretty handily, and Midland County was the only county in the state of Michigan east of Grand Rapids that he won. So if it was color-coded, it was a sea of red throughout the Lower Peninsula, and then one little county in yellow that the guy that I endorsed. So one of 2 things is, I'd like to think my endorsement had that much impact, but I think what it probably more accurately reflects is that my voting record and my philosophy of limited government and lower taxes, less government spending, and support for the prenatal, the lives of prenatal children, our right to keep and bear arms, the conservative values that I ran on, that I made no attempt to hide, I guess, as much as it might be dismaying to some, actually does represent the people of Midland and Bay counties, because it's not a new thing to be found to be the most conservative member of the House. John Molinar and Tony Stamas before me, arguably the most conservative guy running in the Republican primary for president, winning in Midland County. So at least to the extent that any of that indicates that I am faithfully representing the values and the views of the people of Bay and Midland County, that's gratifying. And I certainly intend to continue to do so as long as the people see fit to send me to Lansing on their behalf.
Representative, a lot of issues to talk about today. One would be the Detroit public school system. Actually, only about an hour before we're recording this right now, the House of Representatives passed 2 bills dealing with DPS. One is a $48.7 million supplemental appropriation that in essence keeps the schools open until the end of the school year in June.
Right.
The other one is an oversight piece. In your mind, does the appropriation and oversight, do they go hand in hand?
One would not have passed without the other. In fact, they were officially tie-barred, which means one could not pass without the other. I certainly would not. I don't think the Republican caucus would have supported the $50 million, roughly $50 million, if it had not been accompanied by this legislation to put the Detroit public school systems under the same type of examination and accountability as the city of Detroit was when it was going through bankruptcy. This is an unsavory situation. And my heart breaks, frankly, for those children who get lost in the debate over does the union control or who controls the school board? Am I getting what's in my contract? The focus ought to be on the kids, and you've got 40-some thousand kids who are in a school system that is a failing system that doesn't get the job done. And I'm not saying it's the fault of the teachers. They have significant challenges. I've personally toured multiple schools along with Representative Harvey Santana, Democrat, who hosted a visit that I took down there months ago, and I had him up to Midland as well. But it's a situation where nobody, and certainly in my case, I detest the idea of taking money that would otherwise be distributed evenly across the state, including to Bay and Midland County classrooms, and have to use it to bail out Detroit public schools. But constitutionally, and I have asked my staff to have legislative drafting services draft a constitutional amendment to change this. But we are currently, by the current Constitution, Michigan, the state of Michigan, and the state of Michigan taxpayers are on the hook, legally liable for the expenses of any unit of local government like a school. If they go bankrupt, it's the taxpayers of the state of Michigan. The way it's presented to us, The Detroit Public Schools has about $500 million in outstanding bills right now. All we appropriated today was about 10% of that, just to keep them open several months, along with very stringent accountability standards, because we're not going to bail them out and let them continue to do business in the failed way that they have done it perpetually in the past. But $515 million in outstanding bills and obligations right now, if those aren't paid and they go bankrupt, then every creditor gets in line, and that adds up to $3.5 billion. So as distasteful as it is to me, and I know to people that I represent, the question is $500 million now or in the next 6 months, or $3.5 billion a month or two after you sit back and let them go bankrupt. Obviously, we can't stick the taxpayers of Michigan for 5 times the amount by not doing something to stop the Detroit Public School System from going bankrupt. But when we do, taxpayers have every reason to expect and to demand that we ensure they don't continue to do business as usual. And if people sometimes think I take a hard line position on things, this is one on which I'm going to take a hard line. I will support, when Hurricane Katrina hit the city of New Orleans, they transitioned, immediately because of an act of God, to a total 100% charter school system that has apparently served the children of New Orleans much better than the failed public school system did before. So I am open to any potential reform. I'd like to see us amend the state constitution at some point so that we empower parents to choose the school that would be most successful, safest, best school for their child. And I think parents would not allow their kids, if they had a choice, and low-income parents don't have the same choice that I might have or somebody else might have of choosing to either homeschool or put their kid in a private school that they had to pay tuition for. I think inevitably that is eventually going to be part of the solution, has to be, and we got to change our Constitution. There's an element in our Constitution, a provision that's one of the worst in the nation. It was put in and motivated around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century by an overtly anti-Catholic motivation and bias, in which, unlike a lot of other states like Ohio and Florida and Arizona and other states that have successfully reformed their education system, in Michigan we cannot expend our state of Michigan money to in any way help any school, no matter how good a job they're doing for kids. We can't do it unless they're in the traditional public school system. I think we've got to have reforms, and we need to focus on what's good for kids, for children, for their future, and not on the interests of adults. The public school system, or the school system that delivers the education product, its purpose is not to provide a job service for adults or retirement. Its purpose is to teach children. If we can have both, great. But in a period of limited resources and economic downturn, and thankfully Michigan is producing jobs at a pace faster than anybody else in the nation, and we have the luxury of being able to at least be able to afford, more so than we would have in the last decade, whatever price tag might be associated with reforms. But at this particular time, we've got to do something different. We can't ask taxpayers, I'm not going to ask taxpayers in Bay and Midland County to stand by and see money that would otherwise go into their classrooms go to Detroit, and then see Detroit coming back 5 years from now and with their hand out again. It's just not going to happen on my watch.
Representative, we're going to take a break right now, and we'll be back with Representative Gary Glenn Reports right after this. And we're back with Representative Gary Glenn Reports. Representative, as you said, you continue to do a lot of work here at Lansing on a number of complicated issues. An important issue that you have legislatively actually been working on is the issue of the repeal of Common Core. So tell us about that.
Well, as a candidate for this office, John, I remember distinctly going to the Pinconning Chamber of Commerce candidate forum, and I certainly expected that economic development, job creation, new plant sites, tax policy would have been the issue that dominated discussion at the Chamber of Commerce forum. I was very surprised to find that instead it was the question of Common Core with the president of the Chamber of Commerce, whose father was a former Democratic congressman from the Bay Area, talking about, as I've heard so many times, one of his children coming home with a math problem that he couldn't comprehend or come close to helping her resolve. I spoke to an audience of over 1,000 people in Grand Rapids a couple of weekends ago, and of all the issues talked about in the political spectrum, and they were all discussed, the one that got not just the loudest and longest applause, but the longest standing ovation was when I announced that I was going to introduce legislation to repeal the untested, unproven Common Core educational standards. I think everybody agrees that our school system, our education system should be held to very stringent standards, and I would argue that Michigan school children deserve the best standards that have been proven by time, by test results, by student performance. And Common Core has none of those attributes. It basically swept around the nation when the federal government started offering hundreds of billions of additional money to states that would adopt Common Core, even those who had very successful standards prior. But the legislation that I have proposed with 33 co-sponsors, Republican and Democrat, and from all spectrums, you know, kind of liberal, moderate, conservative in the legislature, would not just repeal Common Core and leave a vacuum. We looked around the country, experts did both in Michigan and nationally, and the business leaders of Michigan had also identified these same standards, that prior to the adoption of Common Core, the best standards in the country for 4th grade reading, 8th grade math, and college and career ready at each step of the way in the educational career, the kids being tested, that what existed in Massachusetts were the #1 ranked educational standards in the country, proven by testing and student performance, as compared to Common Core, which has no track record of having been tested, proven to do what we hope that any educational standard would do, and that's actually result in an increase in student performance and learning. And so this legislation repeals Common Core, replaces it with the pre-Common Core standards from Massachusetts. Now, as a conservative, John, I can tell you that instinctively I would not have gone looking to Massachusetts
Maybe not.
for the best standards in the country. But that's what the experts, it's another indication, example of how I don't have to be an expert on every issue and the hundreds of issues we deal with as long as I've got access to expert counsel. And so that legislation has been introduced. It got enough co-sponsors. Roughly a third of the entire House of Representatives has co-sponsored this. And so I'm hopeful that the chairman of the House Education Committee will allow it to be heard. There's a lot of momentum behind it, a lot of excitement. I can report to you, John, that it generated more constituent contact in the first 48 hours after I announced I was going to introduce it than any other issue I've dealt with in 14, 15 months that I've been a state representative in Lansing. So there is obviously a lot of pent-up sentiment
You hit a chord there.
behind that. And we're hopefully going to ride the wave and at least be able to get it brought up, have the arguments be made. And I'm a long-term thinker. I understand from some of my jobs right after college that you address something in the public policy arena this year in hopes that maybe 5 years from now you can actually get it done, but you got to start the process. And whether it results in actually being signed into law by the governor, or whether it just starts the process that eventually ensures Michigan children get the benefit of the best standards proven by performance, I'm happy to be in the lead on that. I was the lead sponsor, 33 co-sponsors, bipartisan, and we'll see hopefully discussion on that as we proceed.
On another topic, Representative, folks might be maybe surprised to hear that Michigan is almost unique in that the office of the governor and the state legislature are not subject to the Freedom of Information Act, to FOIA. Lawmakers like yourself are now working in a bipartisan fashion to make the governor's office and the legislature through the Legislative Open Records Act more accessible to information that, would you argue, people deserve to have access to?
Well, there are some unique constitutional challenges to just saying that our Freedom of Information Act applies carte blanche in total to the legislature and to the governor, because past court decisions in Michigan have said something to the effect that that might violate separation of powers, with the judiciary ordering that certain documents be turned over, et cetera. I don't claim to be a constitutional lawyer. All I know is we have attempted to go beyond where we are now, and I am a co-sponsor along with Representative Ed McBroom, a Republican, and Jeremy Moss, a Democrat and former city council member, I believe, in Southfield. Which would extend Freedom of Information Act type requirements for public disclosure on the legislature and the governor's office. It would take care to avoid some of these constitutional problems. Like, for example, if somebody communicates to me about a Medicaid or Social Security problem personally as a constituent and asks my office to help them, well, nobody's going to be able to file a FOIA request and be able to see the personal business and health situation of a constituent. So that would be exempt. So anything that would in any way disclose the personal information. There was some of the governor emails regarding Flint, I believe it was, inadvertently released Social Security numbers somewhere recently in state government, some release of records including inadvertently releasing people's private information. So it safeguards against that kind of thing, but it is a step toward imposing FOIA type requirements on the governor's office, the executive branch agencies, and the House of Representatives and the state Senate. So I'm a co-sponsor of that package. That's bipartisan as well. You're always swimming kind of upstream when you're asking a body to regulate itself, but I'm hopeful that it will get a fair hearing, and it's probably, once again, one of those type things where you might not get it done the first time, but if you raise the flag and have the opportunity to make the issue and have it subject to debate and discussion, that maybe you get it done in 2 or 3 years. But I don't think anybody disputes. I kind of took the attitude when I got a call for about an hour from Congressman Dave Camp, former Congressman Camp, about his situation with cancer. He was very open about it, even though it was personal in nature. I followed his lead and immediately made public the situation I was in because I thought people should know. I also wanted the benefit of people's prayers, who I knew would pray for me if they found out about it. But the people who elect us have the right to hold us accountable on any basis they choose. It's up to them. They're the boss. They're the ultimate judge of whether any of us are doing the job. And FOIA applies to all kinds of other areas of government, but it doesn't apply to the governor and the state House of Representatives. This legislation would apply, FOIA-type legislation, and requirements for disclosure on those now exempt bodies. And so I don't know what the prospects for that will be, but that is a reflection of where I stand on the issue, is that people should have open information and make their own judgments as to what they think was appropriate and inappropriate.
You and I, Representative, have talked an awful lot about energy in the last, year and a quarter. A lot has happened, and for that matter, discussions are still ongoing at the state capitol.
Yes, I'm a little frustrated in the fact that the Energy Committee in the House has not met since the 1st of November, except to address 3 resolutions regarding nuclear waste storage in Yucca Mountain, which is being debated when I was in college. So that's been decades. That wasn't really urgent legislation. And there appears to be a standstill in terms of energy reform. Frankly, I think that's a good thing, because it would be better to do nothing, to stay right where we are, than to do harm. The Hippocratic Oath the doctors take, first, do no harm. I'd rather us do no harm than do something bad and make Michigan less competitive with more expensive energy rates. And to illustrate the point, I'm also a member, I'm Vice Chairman of the House Energy Committee. I'm also a member of the Commerce and Trade Committee, and the Small Business Administration of Michigan made a presentation to us last week by their Vice President, our former State Senator Tony Stamas, brother of Jim Stamas, our current State Senator, and whose seat in the House I now hold. And Tony presented a report for 2016 on economic development and what factors were important to attracting new business and industry, new job creation to Michigan. And listed number 6 on the top 10 considerations was energy policy, competitive energy. And as I flipped through this 100-page report, as we listened for about 90 minutes to their testimony, I found 2 pages that were, I thought, instructive. One was a confirmation through the graph that was presented that Michigan has the most expensive electricity rates in the Midwest. This one said current figures 14th highest in the nation. That's not competitive. And then the other graph that was presented is that we have the least reliable electricity market in the Midwest. And the irony, I thought, of this presentation by the Small Business Association of Michigan was that the study had been paid for and compiled by about half a dozen people, including Detroit Edison and Consumers Energy. So the very research that the two incumbent monopoly utilities did indicated we have the most expensive and least reliable electricity market in the country. I don't think, Einstein said something about it being the definition of insanity, keep doing the same thing expecting a different result. If the 90% monopoly system now has given us the most expensive, least competitive electricity rates and least reliable, you're not going to get a different result if you make it 100% monopoly, which is what the utilities want. They apparently have spent some $4 million since January of 2015 in the pursuit of that, $2 million in TV ads about the plants all closing, the doomsday scenario, and $800,000 in lobbying, $600,000 in contributions to elected officials, and yet remarkably, we've been able to stop that juggernaut. I'm not only doing, when I take a stand in favor of more competition, free market principles, and consumer choice, I'm being consistent with what I believe as a matter of philosophy, but it's also the position of Dow Chemical and Dow Corning and Hemlock Semiconductor and Midland Cogeneration Venture, some of the biggest employers in the district that I represent, for whom the cost of electricity is the #1 cost of doing business in the case of Dow Chemical, for whom in the future the biggest determinant of whether or not we're going to continue to expand and hopefully for decades to come have Midland as the headquarters, not just of the white-collar executives, but continue to be home to manufacturing facilities, is going to be the cost of electricity. We've got to get this one right, John. And better that we do nothing in 2016, run out the clock, have another election, another speaker be elected, new chairman of the House Energy Committee, get into the next session, reshuffle the deck, and start over. And we're only, in terms of how many days we're actually in office in an election year, or in Lansing, about 3 months away collectively from making it through 2016 without doing additional harm to Michigan's electricity market. And I think at this point that would be the best thing, and then hope that we can move the reform in a positive direction toward more free market principles and competition and drive the cost down, make Michigan more competitive and more attractive for new industry in the session that starts in 2017. And that's all on the assumption that, Lord willing, I have anything to do with it. If I'm a candidate for re-election, if the people of Bay and Midland counties see fit to judge me as having done a good job representing their views and values and send me back, I look forward, if that's the case, to being in the thick of the energy reform debate, not only the rest of this year to the extent there is any, but certainly with enthusiasm in 2017.
Representative, we have just a couple of minutes left. What's going on in the district?
Well, we have our local party conventions that are going to be coming up. I had a very spirited town hall meeting a couple of weeks ago. We're going to have another one of those the first Monday night at Dow Library, first Monday in April. They go at 6 to 7:30. I've come to the conclusion, John, that I'm going to do that through April. The candidate filing deadline is the middle of April. And I don't want to give even the appearance of using the office to run for re-election. So I don't want anybody to be able to say you're having these town hall meetings and it's really just a re-election forum. So we're going to continue to have town halls one more time through April until there's an official candidate filing that takes place. And certainly if I'm re-elected, I would have every intention of continuing with the tradition I've started of having town hall meetings at Dow Library the first Monday of every month. Even one of my harshest Democrat critics, John, says, and said again at the last town hall meeting, that nobody who's held this office in his memory has been as available to the public to have town hall meetings once a month, to have office hours every Friday, rotating around the district, Pinconning, Auburn, Sanford, Midland. Accessibility, agree with me or not, I'm not hard to find, and I'm not a hide-the-ball type of guy. You're going to know where I stand so that you're fully educated and able to make the judgment as to whether or not you think I can do the job. And then continue to have a very full schedule on the days I'm in Midland and Bay County of Mondays and Fridays on the hour. Scheduled, I think last Friday over lunch, we were triple booked. So I went to one meeting with Dow Chemical to be briefed on the DuPont merger. Mike Goshka, my chief of staff, went to a hospital association briefing, And then Bob Anderson, my other staff member, went to the office hours and met with individual citizens who needed help with an issue. So continuing to be very aggressive about doing the job that the people of Bay and Midland County sent me to Lansing to do.
Representative Gary Glenn, thank you very much. Good talking to you.